Longtime Presbyterians could be excused for thinking they invented the term decently and in order. We Presbyterians certainly say it often enough, but it is a quote directly from 1 Corinthians 14, and it's the last word in Paul's attempt to quell the worship wars in Corinth. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas, and this is your daily devotional for Tuesday, April 5th. 2022. We come at long last to the end of Paul's extended discussion of worship in the Corinthian church and how they might go about resolving their worship wars. It has been quite a journey, and it brings us close to the end of 1 Corinthians as a whole. Close, but not quite there. We'll get to that soon. For now, let's see what Paul does to instruct the Corinthians in their conflicts regarding worship. Over the course of several chapters, Paul has dealt with several issues plaguing the Corinthians in their opinions about worship. But as we've seen, he focuses more and more on the issues of those who speak in tongues and the sense of spiritual superiority they seem to have. Now, at the end, it really comes down to more practical questions, such as who gets to prophesy? Who gets to speak in tongues? What if a dozen people feel moved to speak in tongues? Gone now is the soaring prose. In its place, practical wisdom. Paul himself marks this turn with the question, what should be done then, my friends? In answer to his own question, he says this, when you come together, each one has a hymn, a lesson, a revelation, a tongue, or an interpretation. Let all things be done for building up. Anyone who speaks in a tongue, let there be only two or at most three, and each in turn, and let one interpret. But if there is no one to interpret, let them be silent in church and speak to themselves and to God. Let 2 or 3 prophets speak, and let the others weigh what is said. If a revelation is made to someone else sitting nearby, let the first person be silent. For you can all prophesy one by one, so that all may learn and all may be encouraged. And the spirits of prophets are subject to the prophets. For God is a God not of disorder, but of peace. Anyone who claims to be a prophet or to have spiritual powers must acknowledge that what I'm writing to you is a command of the Lord. Anyone who does not recognize this is not to be recognized. So, my friends, be eager to prophesy, and do not forbid speaking in tongues, but all things should be done decently and in order. A couple of things strike me here. Being a worship leader and one who plans worship services, it looks as though there wasn't a set order of worship in the Corinthian church, at least not the way we think of it. Maybe there was an elder or a group of elders who moderated worship gatherings, but there didn't seem to be a set order of worship, let alone a printed bulletin. And of course, projector screens were nearly 2,000 years in the future. So how did they conduct worship? Well, the direct evidence is scant, but worship seems to have been modeled on the Jewish synagogue, where people gathered to hear the scriptures read, probably a lesson from one of the leaders of the community, and the singing of psalms. Add to this prophecy and the practice of speaking in tongues. There was very likely a fairly well-recognized order of worship, even if it wasn't written out for everyone. Reading between the lines, the worship difficulties the Corinthians were experiencing arose because of the unpredictability of those who spoke in tongues and what they brought to the service. Picture it this way. Even if we didn't have a printed order of worship, we would all pretty much know what to expect during worship. Doesn't matter whether it is high church with its formal liturgy like ours, or contemporary church. Nearly all Christian worship has a regular and predictable order to it. Over time, we grow comfortable with it, and deviations from it can cause us to be uncomfortable. So now, imagine that in the middle of one of our services, someone suddenly stood up and began to preach a sermon from their pew, or someone began, heaven forbid, to speak in a strange and unintelligible language, to speak in tongues. It would absolutely throw us off. More than that, it would throw us into confusion. That's why Paul offers the advice he does. He wants to leave room for the possibility of someone speaking in tongues and for people to be free to add to the service in other ways. But all of this should be done in a way that preserves the essential order of the service intact. In the end, he lodges his advice in the very character of God, a God, he says, of order, not chaos, a God of peace, not of disorder. It is at the very end of this entire section that Paul gives us the immortal phrase, all things should be done decently and in order. It is one last parting reminder to the Corinthians to quit their bickering with one another and get on with the more important things. What important things? Paul now turns his attention to the very heart of the Christian gospel, the resurrection. Chapter 15 is a lengthy chapter and the longest treatment of the resurrection we have. But that's not what we'll get to tomorrow. For that, we'll wait until after Easter. Tomorrow, we'll dip our toe into Paul's other letter to the Corinthians. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.